Good morning and welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's having a good summer. We're having a hot summer. It's probably going to be 100 degrees again today. But, you know, that's summer in the desert west mountain area we're in. I wanted to do a video on the top 6 things I wish I'd known before I got chickens. I got chickens, I'm thinking it's probably been 8 years ago now, maybe a little bit less, but it was a while back, and we made a lot of mistakes, and we learned a lot. So I figured I would share, because I see that a lot of people this year got chickens and weren't any more prepared than we were when we got ours, and I really wish that there was more information out there that is readily available to new chicken owners. But it was panic buying because of the plague and the fear, and I get it, and I think that it's wise to be prepared, and if you can have chickens, you should get chickens. But you need to know what you're doing before you do it, because it's a big commitment and they're a living thing. And yes, good morning, girls. They hear me talking, and so they think that it must be time for treats, but it's not. So these are the things that I wish I didn't know. First of all, what kind of chickens you want to have. We didn't know anything about chicken breeds. We just figured chickens are chickens. Chickens lay eggs, and that, you know, the breed differences are really more about how they look than anything else. But I've discovered that there is a big difference. That's my air conditioner, so it's going to be a little noisy, but we'll press on. Good morning, turkeys. So first, the thing to think about is that there are differences in simply what the chicken breed is meant for. There are laying hens, and then there are meat chickens. And meat chickens are not meant to live for more than 12 weeks max, really. And that doesn't seem like very long, and it's not. And they grow really fast. Keeping them beyond that age is cruel, because their muscles and their bones cannot support the weight that they put on, because they get huge. Good morning, little Tom. You see little Tom? Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah. So we ended up with 2 meat chickens, because we didn't know better, and we thought that the person at Tractor Supply knew what they were doing and understood what the difference was. We said, we want laying hens, and they just reached in the bin, and we said, well, we like that color and we like that color, and they just reached in the bin and put a bunch of them in a box, and 2 of them ended up being meat chickens. We didn't find that out for probably more than 12 weeks when we started noticing how badly they were doing. They couldn't hold up their own weight, and they just were miserable and huge. And it took me digging in, researching why, to find out, oh, these are meat chickens. So now I have to also learn how to butcher a chicken, because nobody wants to do that. That is in our area, at least. Not for free, certainly, and we didn't want to pay somebody to do it. We figured, well, we got into this knowing there was a chance we would end up butchering at least some of them, and so now's the time to do it. I wasn't a stranger to it, but this was my first time doing it all by ourselves, so we learned, and it ended up fine, but it was not something we were prepared to take on. So be very careful about the breeds. The breeds that typically are used for meat chickens are your Cornish cross. I think there's, I can't remember the other names, but if you do a little bit of research, and I'll put some information, I'll overlay it on this video, the names of the meat chicken breeds. The rest of the breeds of chickens you're going to find are either going to be really good layers, okay layers, or they're more for what they call ornamental, which is they're just pretty and they'll lay an egg, but not all that frequently. So be careful about that. Your best laying breeds are going to be your leghorns. We've got white and brown leghorns. They both lay an egg pretty much every day, and it's a big white egg. And you're also going to want to know, do you want brown eggs, do you want white eggs, do you want color eggs? Do you want mixture? Figure out, and I'll overlay the different breeds that lay the different color eggs. But for our brown egg layers, we've got some cuckoo marins, and we've got Orpingtons, Australorps. They all lay brown eggs, different shades of brown eggs. The marins lay the darker chocolate brown eggs. There's also Welsumers. They lay a nice dark egg. I don't have any of those, but I know people that do. For our white eggs, we have our Leghorns. We have an Andalusian. There's just various breeds that lay the white eggs, but the most reliable are the Leghorns. The blue egg layers, we have cream leg bars. They don't lay an egg every single day, but most days. And they're a big blue to blue-green color. You'll have what they call Easter eggers. You'll have them listed on bins in feed stores as Americanas or Americanas with a U. They are not going to be a reliable blue egg layer. There is a breed known as an Araucana that does, but they're more expensive and they're not typically sold in feed stores. Typically what you've got in feed stores is a crossbreed, and it will lay anywhere from a kind of a tannish egg to a green to a blue. It just depends on what it was bred with and how true the breeding was for that different color. We've had different, and they're also known as Easter eggers, because you will get a variety of colors from them. We've had almost every color when we've had Easter eggers. We've only got one Easter egger left, and she's too old and isn't laying anymore, but she laid a green egg pretty consistently. For the most social breeds, and yes, some breeds are more social than others. A lot depends on how you socialize them, but in some cases it's not going to matter because their breed just isn't very social. Our blue Andalusian, she is completely not social. She won't let you near her. But she's not antisocial. She won't go after you or anything, but she just doesn't want you anywhere near her. Orpingtons tend to be very friendly, but we have one Orpington that just isn't. But we didn't handle her a whole lot either. We have Leghorns that don't want anything to do with you, but we did have several that we handled a lot, and they liked us and they wanted to be picked up. So a lot depends on how you socialize them, but sometimes it's just the breed and it won't matter. But if you want something more social, probably your most reliable social breed. What is it? What? What? Your most reliable social breed is going to be your Orpingtons. And as long as you socialize them, you should be able to handle them without any trouble. In fact, they'll probably follow you around the yard like a puppy. There are noisier breeds and quieter breeds, and sometimes the noise is really just when they lay their egg. There's some that just like to tell you about it a lot more. If you're in an area where you want to try to keep the volume down, our Leghorns don't tend to announce a whole lot when they lay an egg. In fact, they just go in and do their business and they're done. Our Orpingtons do tend to make a little bit more noise, but not for a long time. You'll see if you go onto any of the hatchery sites, they'll list all of these kinds of breed traits, including if they tend to be noisy or not, if they're a quiet breed. It also talks about whether they're heat tolerant and cold tolerant, and that really, we have a very mixed flock, and so we've got some that are listed as heat tolerant and some that are listed as cold tolerant. But because we have a mixed flock, we have to take care of them all as if they are not either, and just provide ventilation, lots of water, and treat all of our chickens for the heat and keep their coop warm and draft free all winter. It's just, we have to do that because we have a mixed flock. The next thing that I wish we'd have known before we chose our breeds, some of them tend to go broody and some of them are not as broody. What broody means is that they think they are supposed to be sitting on eggs and hatching out babies, and so they'll sit in the coop and they won't leave the nesting box, and they act crazy, and when you do get them out, they run around and they shake their head and they squawk and they act like they've got something wrong with them, simply because they're telling other chickens, I've got babies and you stay away from them, I'm going to protect them. And And so they act kind of crazy that way. And some of them will only do it once a year. Some will do that several times a year, and it can last as much as a month or more. I can talk in another video on how to deal with that, but just know that some breeds will do that more than others, and when they're broody, they're not laying eggs. So if that's a concern, look at some of the breeds that don't tend to go broody. I don't think I've ever had any of my leghorns go broody, but that also means that it's going to be harder to get them to hatch out more babies. You're also going to want to prepare for the fact that you may get some roosters. If you don't want to risk getting a rooster, you absolutely don't want to risk it because you don't have a plan for it, then get what they call an auto-sexing breed. That's going to be your cream leg bars, the salmon faveroles. There's several that are auto-sexing. Black sex links, gold sex links, any of the sex links are auto-sexing, so you can pretty reliably just get hens. And if that's a real concern, then I recommend that you just do that. And if you're considering another breed and you absolutely do not want to risk a rooster, wait until they're older. Find some that are already at a point where they're laying. It's called a started pullet. Get a started pullet, because then you'll know that it's a hen, not a rooster. Next category, where to buy the chickens. There are several sources. You can start with a feed store. There's a lot of feed stores around the country that sell chickens. They don't sell them constantly. They have certain times of the year that they'll have them. Typically February, March is when you'll see most of them have them, and then they'll have them off and on during the spring and summer after that. You can contact your local feed store, find out when they're getting chicks in, ask them what kind of breeds they've ordered. It's not a guarantee they'll get that breed, but ask them if that's what breeds they've ordered. Sometimes you can even pre-order a batch of 10 or more chicks of a particular breed that you want, and they'll order them in for you. Again, there's no guarantee that they'll be able to get them. Another place that you can get them is from your local farmer. You're going to know the health and the security of where the chicks come from by visiting the farm. See if that's a good source, because not all sources are good and healthy. Not all farmers take good care of their chickens, and that can lead to chickens that have either inbred conditions that are health issues. Maybe they're not going to be very healthy to get started, and that can tend to lean towards you losing some of them early on because they just weren't healthy. They weren't strong. Another source is an online hatchery. There's a bunch of them. I've ordered from Ideal Poultry several times, and I've had really good luck with them, but there are plenty of really good hatcheries out there. Not all of them deal with all breeds. Most of them have the more common breeds like your leghorns, buff Orpingtons, and things like that, but you'll pretty much have good support from a hatchery because it's their business to sell chickens. That's all they do, and so it's within their best interest to only sell healthy, strong chicks from good breeding stock. And there's plenty of good reliable ones online. When you order them online though, they have to be shipped, and you can lose some in shipping. I haven't ever had it happen, but I know that it can happen, and you have to be prepared to get to the post office, if that's how it's handled in your area, quickly, because the post office isn't prepared to keep your chicks alive, keep them warm, and chicks really need to be kept warm and dry, and they're not necessarily prepared to do that. So you have to plan for that. They're also going to ask you if you want medicated or non-medicated, if you want your chicks vaccinated. I usually get them vaccinated. It's going to prevent anything that may have been picked up at the hatchery. I'm not going to talk about diseases because that's a huge subject, but medicated, if you're going to get it from a hatchery, it doesn't cost very much, and it's always worth it. And especially if you're not planning to be a strictly organic farmer, and that's another whole topic. You can get them from multiple sources. You can go to different hatcheries and feed stores, or even hatcheries, and say this one has this breed, that one has that breed. It's a bit more of a hassle, and if you're doing this online, it's going to cost you more in shipping. if you're having them shipped when it's a little bit cold outside, they're going to add what they call packing peanuts. We didn't know this the first time we ordered from a hatchery, and they threw in 6 rooster chicks, and we didn't want any roosters. We ordered only pullets, and we got 6 roosters with them. So be prepared that they may do that, or if they're going to add a heat source for them, that will cost you extra. Get the heat source. Don't risk the packing peanuts. And check with them before you place an order and ask them, are you going to include any other chicks? Again, if you're ordering breeds that are not auto-sexing, you're going to risk getting a rooster. Out of that first batch that we ordered, we ended up with 1 rooster. The rest were all hens, but it's a risk. Okay, next category. What equipment are you gonna need? Really, you don't need much for chicks. Once you get into when they get to a little bit older, you're gonna wanna have more, but there's time, a little bit of time to prepare. So the first thing you're gonna need, of course, is a brooder. That can be anything. I've used plastic bins. I've used wash tubs and cardboard boxes. Always consider how many chicks you're getting and the space that they're going to need. Initially, they're not going to need much room, and you're going to want to kind of keep them kind of close to each other and close to the heat source. But as they get bigger, they're going to need more room. So having something that maybe you can expand, maybe divide it in half and then expand it as they grow, is a good idea. In a lot of the feed stores, they use the great big water troughs. So what you house them in isn't as important as that it's a safe place for them to be, that it's easy for you to clean. You have to consider how easy it's going to be to clean, because you will need to clean it periodically. And does it have room for them to kind of stretch their legs, run around? And I like to keep an area where the heat lamp really isn't focused, so that if they get too warm, they have a place where they can go to cool off. A lot of times they're going to want to stay under the heat lamp, but there are some breeds, and then, you know, time of year, the temperature's going to fluctuate. It's going to make them want to stay away from the heat source for at least part of the time. So it's good to give them that option. Bedding for your brooder, I recommend pine shavings, and some people use newspaper. I don't suggest that because it can be slippery and it can cause a condition called spraddle leg. We can deal with that in another video, but that's a condition that can cripple your chicks. So whatever you use, it should be something where they can get a good solid footing, so they're not sliding around and spreading out their legs and their feet. I like to use pine shavings. It's easy to clean, they're comfortable on it, but people use different things. I can only suggest what I've used that works for me. Do not use cedar shavings because it has a toxic chemical in it. Like I said, always provide room for them to grow. You could start out with lots of space if you want, divide it and provide more space as they grow, but consider the fact that at some point they are not going to be tiny anymore, and they are going to want to flap their wings and run around and get some exercise. And if you're using a very small brooder, they're going to quickly outgrow it, and that can be a problem for you as much as it is for them, because then you're going to have to think of another place to keep them. I also keep on top of my brooder, and for me it's makeshift, but you know, you can buy a screen big enough to fit over the top of the brooder. You can use wire cage. You can use whatever to not completely close it off so that it doesn't allow condensation to escape, but that it keeps them from flying out and keeps other things from getting in, which is just as important, especially if you have cats. They'll want to get in at them. I just have a big screen that I put on top of it, and then I weigh it down with bricks on either end to just keep from anything lifting it up. And then I'll set my heat lamp. It can even, in the early days when they need more heat, it can sit right on top of that screen, so it's not going to fall in. And that's important, not having anything dropping in there, either just because it could kill something just from landing on it, but a heat lamp that falls down into your pine shavings can very quickly cause a fire. Something to think about. As they get older, they're going to be trying pretty hard to get out. And so if whatever you have on top of it isn't securely weighed down, they will flip that off of there and they'll come out. So think about that. Feeders and waterers, you can use almost anything, and people do. I like the little plastic ones that have the little screw top on them, but they do have a tendency to tip those over, and if it's the waterer, it's gonna get the bedding all wet, and that's not healthy, and it causes you to have to clean more frequently. But I saw in our local feed store a contraption that is similar to something I rigged up, where it's a strap around the feeder bottle that attaches to the side of the brooder so they can't tip it over. And I wish I'd have patented that idea. Maybe I'd make a little bit of money off of it, but somebody did. And so there are things like that that you can buy. There's a lot of different ways you can attach it so that they don't tip it over. But just be aware, you will be changing their water frequently. I raise mine up on a brick. It gives them a platform to stand on, and they can get their water without flicking pine shavings in it, but they dig around pretty feverishly in pine shavings, so they're still probably going to get some in there. So keep an eye on their water. They need access to water all the time. Chickens cannot digest their food without water, and so if they're out of water, then they're not eating, and they can very quickly have a problem. For the feeder, you can use anything, but understand that chickens will poop in everything. And if they're able to stand in it, not only will they poop in it, but they will also kick it out all over the place. I like the kind of feeders where they have to actually put their head in, has the little openings, so they have to actually put their head in, and it doesn't matter how much they claw at it, they're not going to be throwing it all over the place. But again, you're going to want to make sure that they can't tip it over, because they will. A heat lamp or a brooder plate is a good idea for chicks. You can't do it without them, because they will get cold even if you keep them in your house, which I don't recommend, but if you do, they're going to still get cold. They need to be kept for the first week at least about 95 degrees, and your house isn't going to be at 95 degrees. When they are naturally with their mother, she has them underneath her most of the time, and they can kind of go in and out as they choose, but most of the time they're underneath her, and her resting body temperature is well over 100 degrees, and so she keeps them good and warm. And you're going to need to do the same thing, and you're going to need to replicate that heat. But again, they like to go out from underneath their mom from time to time and kind of scooch around and then run back when they get cold. That's why I prefer to use a brooder plate rather than a heat lamp. I'll use a heat lamp if it's particularly cold. If I get chicks, you know, in the early spring. What do you want? My goodness. She's pecking at my knee because she wants attention, and I'm not going to be giving you attention right now. Go play. I use a Brinsea Eco Brooder, and they love getting up underneath there. They'll sit on top of it and keep their little feet warm. When they don't want to be under it and have their whole body warm, they still sometimes want to keep their feet warm, and so they like that. And they can hop on it, hop off of it. They like it. But if it is particularly cold, I will add that heat lamp. If you don't want to use the Eco Brooder, you just want a heat lamp, that's fine. I find that they feather out faster if they don't have that constant heat source on top of them, and so they're ready to move out to the coop a lot sooner. But you know, it's personal choice strictly. It's not going to matter that much. And as far as the location of your brooder, don't put it in your house. If you have to, you have to. But I recommend if you can keep it out in a garage, out in a shed somewhere that has good ventilation, and that you can provide that heat source. You have electricity somehow that provide a heat source, that there's no noxious chemicals or anything like that in the air. And if you have a garage, but you have somebody that does, I don't know, something in there that puts off a lot of fumes, like they work on cars and they don't want to leave the garage door open to allow the fumes to escape, that could be a problem. I've kept mine in my garage a number of times, but I've also, my coop back there, where's there? That right there. The front of my coop I have as a storage area, but I also set up a unit where I put a brooder bin. It's just a great big plastic bin I got at Walmart, and that's what I use for my brooder area. It's outside, so it doesn't have heat. I run an extension cord, one of those outdoor extension cords, out to it, and that's how I provide electricity to the brooder. The reason why I don't like to keep them in the house is chicks have dander. Their little baby feathers very quickly come off, and it gets everywhere. It's also known as chicken dust. It just gets everywhere, and it will get on surfaces, especially if you keep it in an area where you eat or prepare food. It will get on those surfaces, and that's not healthy. It will also be in the air you're going to be breathing it. If you have them in like an office or a spare room or in your basement, that's probably fine, but you will be cleaning chicken dander off those surfaces. Just be prepared. No matter how much you try to contain them, that dander goes everywhere. Okay, next thing that I wish we'd have known was about feed. We had no idea what we were doing with feed, and we spent a lot of money trying different things. And it really isn't that critical that you feed them particularly one brand or another. Feed stores have been doing this for a long time, and they have it down to a pretty good science when they put together their mixes and their crumbles. You're going to want something that is a starter grower. You're not going to want to have to use the grower finisher at first. It has a lot more vitamins in it, and they need those more, and probiotics in it. They need it more when they're smaller, mainly for them to handle adjusting to the environment. And it also, a lot of times they'll have medicated versions, and you can get that if you're concerned about that. It's not critically necessary, but it's not a bad idea. If it makes you feel better to use a medicated crumble, it's not going to hurt them, but it will cost you a little bit more. I use it for the first, I'll get a small bag of it, and I'll use it for the first week or two while they're adjusting to their new environment, and then I just switch to just the regular starter. Again, they need water in order to digest their food, so you have to always have clean water for them, and they will mess up their water pretty quickly. So plan on changing their water a couple times a day easily. Switching them over to a layer feed, there's a couple of thoughts on that, about when to do that. I don't tend to do it until they're going to actually be out of the coop, if they're going to be outside. Now, if you're starting with chickens for the first time, you're not going to have other chickens around, and so it doesn't matter when you switch them over to layer feed as far as when they leave the coop, because there won't be any other feed out there. But when you have other chickens, you're probably feeding them layer feed, and it has a lot of calcium in it. And calcium is not necessarily really good for chicks' digestive system. It can cause kidney problems, but it causes problems. And so you're going to want to switch to what they call a mixed flock ration, which doesn't have calcium in it, but it can be eaten by layers and by young chickens. And at that point, you're going to need to offer supplemental oyster shell or another calcium source for your laying hens off to the side. The chicks probably won't mess with it, but the laying hens need that calcium, so you still have to offer extra calcium. As far as when you switch new chicks over to layer feed, don't do it until they're showing signs that they're ready to lay. They'll be fully feathered, their combs and wattles will be in, they'll be grown in, and their combs and wattles will start to turn red. Once that happens, they're getting ready to lay. Some will surprise you and suddenly will start laying, but that's a good time to switch them over to it. Having that extra calcium available to them as soon as they're ready to leave the coop and start being either in their run or in your yard, wherever you're going to have them range. Have the extra calcium available out there for those that might be starting to go into laying earlier than the others, especially if you have a mixed flock. Have that out there for those hens to start having a free choice. Something else that you're going to need to consider is grit. They don't need it until they're eating something other than their starter grower or their grower crumble, because that's designed to break down pretty easily with water. But once they start eating other things, if you start to offer them treats of any kind, that's when you're going to need to provide for them grit at free choice. And you can buy bags of grit at your feed store. They have the kind that's designed just for chicks. It's really small. It helps them to get used to using it. Wouldn't hurt to start offering that to them almost right away. But it is one more thing they're going to throw everywhere. But once they are out of the coop and digging in dirt or eating treats or any of that kind of thing, that's when they're going to need to have grit. And they always need to have it. Free-range chickens don't tend to need it as much. I still offer it if they want it. But they go out and they pick it up off the ground. They dig it up out of the dirt. But the ones that are kept in controlled environments, particularly those in a very small run, will need to have it. And then the next category is supplements and first aid. Yes, you need to think about this when you're getting new baby chicks, because you just don't know what you're going to have happen in those early weeks. You can wait and see, but I recommend this list. First, you're going to want to get vitamins. You may have a chick that is just not seeming to do real well. They're not perking up very well. Maybe they're acting lethargic. I try to hedge against that, and I just start putting some vitamins in their water so that all of them have that. A honey booster is something that I always give them for the first couple days, especially if they've been shipped in. And it's just a combination of just a little bit of honey, some probiotics, a little apple cider vinegar, and water not too warm but also not cold. Just kind of freshen them up, and that honey gives them a little boost of energy. It has natural antibiotics in it. Try to stick with raw honey if you can get it. The probiotics, I just get in a little packet in the feed store and just add that in there. And then the apple cider vinegar, just to every quart, maybe a capful, not even. And that helps with their digestion. That's kind of a standard for me that I always do for at least the first few days, and then I'll do it for new chicks. I'll do it once a week, every week. And if I have one that's sick, that's the first thing I do is add that. There's a couple of first aid treatments that you're going to want to always have on hand all the time that you have chickens. And this can be from the very first day. You have one that got pecked by the others and has a wound, whatever happened. There's a spray called Vetircin. You can get it at your feed store. Any animal supply stores should have it. It's just a spray-on antiseptic, and it'll help clean out the wound. And then there's a chemical called Blue Coat, and coat is spelled K-O-T-E. You're going to want to get that and paint that. Okay. Hey, I had to stop for a second, more than a second, for a few hours because my battery needed to be recharged. So I'm sitting in a different spot because this is where the shade is. That to pick up where I left off, I was talking about the different supplements and first aid, and I had gotten down to Blue Coat. Blue Coat is a topical antiseptic, and it is blue, and it's very blue. It will stain your fingers. I recommend wearing gloves. I never wear gloves. I just live with a little bit of blue on my fingers till it wears off. It mostly scrubs off, but there'll be some left. Don't get it on your clothes because I don't think it'll wash out. But the reason why it's important that it stains like that is because it turns an area that is a wound that would otherwise be red or pink and turns it blue. And chickens don't peck at the color blue, they peck at the color red. And so to keep them from pecking at whatever wound a bird might have and from pecking at their own wound, that blue deters them. It also has a nasty taste to it, and so if they get some in their mouth, they don't like it. And so they'll peck at it one time and that'll be it, and they'll remember. And it's really good, a good antiseptic. VetRx is a liquid that I pour into their water just a couple of drops if I'm starting to see any kind of signs of respiratory illnesses, or if there's a respiratory illness going around in the area. It's a good preventative, but it is for upper respiratory conditions, and works really well. It's very mentholy and just works really well for them. Clears it up pretty good, and is a good preventative. Apple cider vinegar is good for their insides. It has a lot of good probiotics, and it has a good pH to it. It helps to balance their pH so that, you know, that it'll fight a lot of intestinal problems, diarrhea and things like that. So it helps to keep that good flora in their intestinal tract. Diatomaceous earth, somewhat controversial in the chicken community. I use it, but I don't use it a ton. I'll sprinkle it on their droppings boards and on their roosting bars, and just kind of brush it around when they're not really in there, because it gets into their respiratory system, and it's just not good. It's not good for anybody's respiratory system, not even yours. So be very careful when you are using it. You can put it in their feed. I've heard that flies don't want to eat the feces from an animal that has diatomaceous earth in their feed as it comes out. Diatomaceous earth, its effect on insects is it basically destroys them from the inside, and so it's good to, you know, kind of preventing or controlling any kind of flies or things like that. It's also good on mites. It works the same way on mites. I sprinkle it in their bedding and kind of stir it in, but not when they're in there, so that the dust has a chance to settle. There are a lot of people that use diatomaceous earth as a dusting under chickens' wings and around their vent. I tend to not use it for that. Sometimes I will if I think that there's a problem with mites, but I tend to use 7 dust instead. And yes, that is a pesticide, so you do need to be careful with it, with yourself and with the chickens. You're going to want to probably wait until they go to roost at night, because that's when they'll let you pick them up, and they won't get too freaked out. They're going to freak out still, but they won't get too freaked out, and they're easy to catch that way. Anytime you need to catch a chicken, wait till it goes to roost at night, and then you just reach up on the roosting bar and get it. Which is why predators are a bigger problem at night, because the chickens, when they go to roost, they kind of go into almost like a trance-like state. They don't know what's going on around them, and so that's why you can grab them when they're sleeping. But 7 dust is good for that kind of thing. You won't need it with chicks, but you know, for the future. And then there's sweet PDZ. I like to use that in their bedding because, especially in the winter time, it keeps things dry, it controls odor, it helps to just really control that condensation that could get into the coop. I don't really use it with the chicks. I'm more concerned that they'll peck at it and eat it, but I'll also scatter it on the droppings boards because, again, it controls moisture and odors. Other than that, kind of the last category is etc., and it just means stuff. One thing is that a lot of people, especially when they get chicks, because they're so cute, you want to hold them, and little kids want to snuggle them and they want to kiss them, and I recommend that you teach your children and yourself not to kiss your chickens. And when you've handled them, don't handle food or drink until you have washed your hands with soap and water. We've made it a regimen here at our house from the very beginning. Everybody washes with soap and water after doing anything with the chickens, handling them or handling their stuff. Because chickens have salmonella on their feathers and on the surface of their body, and it can transmit to humans, and that's how humans get sick. I've never had it happen with us because we are so careful about washing hands and not touching food or drink until we have washed our hands. It works just plain soap and water, nothing special. Regular cleanings, especially of a brooder, because that's where they are all the time. So that's their entire environment, and if it's not clean, they're gonna get sick. So I clean my brooder completely out at least once every couple of weeks, but I do a good kind of a sifting through, and any wet bedding I'll pull out and replace with dry bedding almost every day. I'm always checking it and keeping it clean, keep their water clean, and that you'll go a long way to preventing any illnesses or losing any chicks if you're just really meticulous about keeping things clean. Ventilation, you're not going to want to have them in an environment that's completely closed. They do give off quite a bit of chicken dust, and they give off quite a bit of just in their exhalation. They give off a lot of moisture. That's how chickens cool themselves, is by when they breathe out. They breathe out the warm air, and the warm air will bring with it moisture, and that's how they control their body temperature. And if they are in an environment that isn't well ventilated, you're going to have a buildup of that moisture in the bedding and just in general in the air, and that's not healthy. Okay, I want to finish up by just saying that whenever you're going to get chicks, always plan for when they're not chicks anymore. They're going to get big, and they're going to get big fast. You're going to want to consider their housing just as soon as you consider getting them. You don't have to have it when you first get them, but you should be well on your way to having a permanent coop for them. Stay away from those prefabricated little tiny coops that you can get online. They're not made well. They will fall apart. They might get you through a couple of months, but that's going to be about it. I created a video on my chicken coop. There's a whole tour video, and I'll link that down below. But we built a full chicken coop, and it's huge. In fact, that's it back there. You don't have to have something that big, but you should consider something that's good and sturdy. As far as fencing, you can use something as simple as a dog run. As long as you've got a top on it to keep predators out, and you're able to get in and out of it, and you're able to secure it, you're good to go. You're going to want to think about digging predators, especially dogs, but there are other predators that'll dig. And if you can take some hardware wire, which you can get in any building supply store, tractor supply, anything like that, you're going to want to dig around the edge of your run about a foot down, and you're going to want to attach that welded wire to your run side, or whatever, if you use a dog run, to that chain link fence, and then bury it down that far, and then splay it out so that it's flat away from the coop, so that any digging predators, they'll get down and they'll hit that wire and they won't be able to go any further. You can use chicken wire, but all chicken wire does is keep chickens in. It won't keep predators out. So I would consider something more like welded wire. They don't need to free range. I like to free range mine, but you can keep them in a run. But consider the space of the run. You're going to want about 4 square feet per chicken for run space. That's a pretty fair amount if they're spending all their time in there. If they're not spending all their time in there, it doesn't need to be that large, and it just needs to be a place where they can run to get shelter, especially if it's raining or snowing. Our chickens don't spend much time in their run, but they do run there when it rains. Other than that, for security, you're going to want to consider the kind of entry into your coop. I have an electric coop door that is on a timer. It opens at the same time every morning, closes at the same time every night, and it's predator proof. And it makes me feel a lot better knowing I don't have to worry about, oh, did I shut the coop? Oh, did I open the coop? Well, can I sleep in today and not have to go out and open up the coop? If I go away for vacation, that's one less thing that I have to worry about having somebody do. And that's something else to consider when you're getting chickens. What if you go on vacation? Will you have someone that can step in and just take care of them while you're gone? And it's not a huge, difficult job, but it's something that's important that needs to be done. And you may say to them, keep the eggs that you gather. A lot of people will do it just for that, to have fresh eggs. A lot of people will do it to teach their kids how to take care of chickens because they're thinking about getting chickens. But you just really need to think who's going to take care of them if I have to go somewhere, if I have to be gone. And have a plan for that, because you can't just not take care of them. I'll talk more about other things like predators, things like that in another video, but I just wanted to cover some of the real important basics of getting chicks. I recommend people get chickens. I love having my chickens. I love having chicks. My kids have learned so much about just life in general, but they've really learned a lot more about being self-sufficient. I just love having my chickens. They're smart, they're funny, they're entertaining. I could sit out here and just watch them instead of watching TV, and I do. But you have to want to do what's necessary to raise them to be healthy and to have a happy life. Otherwise, don't do it. They're not a toy that you can just get and ignore and sometimes pay attention to. And it does cost to feed them, and in the end, the result of the cost, you're not going to be able to buy a dozen eggs, or I should say the other way around. You could buy many dozens of eggs for what it costs to produce 1 dozen of your own home raised chicken eggs, but you're never going to get the quality. You're not going to know what's in them, and you're not going to have the comfort of knowing that the chickens that provided those eggs for you and your family were raised in a healthy environment. What you need to know is that they're not raised in a healthy environment. They don't get to see the sun. They don't get to have fresh air. They don't get to scratch around in the dirt. They're kept in cages their entire life. And once they're no longer laying, they are usually processed for animal feed and whatever, fertilizer, I don't know what else. But it's not a happy life. And if we're looking to a more sustainable way of living, to where you have a renewable protein source, that's going to be chickens. If you're looking to have more humanity in your food source, raising your own chickens is going a long way to that. I encourage you to get them, raise them, enjoy them, but do your homework first. So I hope that this helped. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions of things that you want me to do a video about, pop a comment down below, and I'll try to respond to any comments that I see. So happy chickening!